The election of countries to the UN Human Rights Council is set to take place Friday at the UN General Assembly. Russia's at risk of being excluded from the council over its actions in Syria after protests this week from a large group of non-governmental organizations, including Human Rights Watch. Meanwhile, however, Saudi Arabia is set to be re-elected for a fourth time. We can now speak to a representative of the organizations, one of them behind the appeal to exclude Russia, Dr. Kais Deri, a regional director of the Syrian Relief Network. Thanks so much for joining us here on RT International today. It's great to see you. These are very strong claims to make that Russia is, quote, not fit to serve on the UN Human Rights Council. Obviously, with you being a regional director of the Syrian Relief Network, you must have some proof of the crimes being alleged.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for having me, first of all. Secondly, me personally and all the other 86 organizations who signed it, we firmly believe that Russia does not belong to the Human Rights Council. Otherwise, it should be on the other side of the table where they are questioned about their actions, especially in Syria. The list is very long from our side. In addition, many states, including United States, UK, France, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, they all condemned the actions of Russia in Syria, usage of weapons.
Ultimately, they're condemning the actions of Russia, as we all know. Though these are parties that are supporting those who are in opposition to the elected president, that of Bashar al-Assad. So we understand that members from Europe or America would quickly be opposed to Russia and what Russia is doing against the terrorists in Syria. Obviously, though, the Syrian Relief Network, you guys are working hard. You're a humanitarian organization. You're there to help the people. Are you having any trouble with the funding there in a war zone? Are you getting your funding okay?
Well, the funding is not an issue, I can tell you for sure. It's how do we operate. It's the human losses we incur. It's the action of many states that impeding our effort to evacuate the injured, to deliver the aid. That is the main problem. The issue of funding, I don't believe in these days where all the states in the world are supporting the effort for Syria is a matter. But the main issue is how to do it. We are incurring daily losses from humanitarian
I think you raise a very good point, Dr. Deri. The question is, how do you actually do it? Because as you well know, working there in Syria, Russia has proposed numerous times to work with America, to have America help Russia to escort the civilians out of Aleppo. However, every time Russia makes that proposal, America says no. Surely humanitarian issues should overcome political issues.
Absolutely, I agree with you. However, and I'm not going into details, I can assure you that Russia is among other parties that impeded the latest medical evac effort we tried to do in Aleppo and refused completely to channel any aid.
Can you give us some information on how this happened? Because we believe the Ministry of Defense has been trying to be transparent in this. Maybe you could give us some evidence of your concerns here.
We always demanded to channel aid into any besieged city in addition to evacuation of the injured. However, from the Russian side, the offer was only to get those injured outside the city without any aid going in. That showed us that it's not a real effort they're trying to do. If you continue bombarding the city, you will have hundreds of injured every single day.
It's very worrying. You're absolutely right, Dr. Deri. We agree with you here. This is a humanitarian catastrophe in Aleppo. But one of the concerns is, you may say that Russia's creating problems for the civilians trying to be freely exited from Aleppo, although Russia is, as far as we understand, trying to help. What about the militants? Because we understand the militants, extremists, mercenaries, terrorists, they're using civilians as human shields. We understand they've also been preventing them from leaving as well. Where do you apportion the blame, Dr. Deri?
But by the way, we condemn any act that prevent human aid from getting to the population or medical evacs. However, during the negotiations, we always find that the superpowers, namely Russia, is the one that keep impeding. They are trying to impose very harsh rules and conditions to get any aid in or patients out. From the other side, eventually we can get some sort of cooperation. But I would say it again, the most problematic thing is the continuous bombardment, the impeding of our effort.
But the continuous
to
bombardment, to take the words that you are using, Dr. Deri, to take your own words, the continuous bombardment. We have reports every day of militant shells being shot from eastern Aleppo into the safely government-controlled Western Aleppo. You're telling me you condemn all acts of violence, but you're not condemning the militants who are killing civilians.
We're not denying that fact, and we condemn it day and night. Targeting civilians from all parties is a crime against humanity. We cannot tolerate it. So we're not siding with one side over another. However, I would like to mention that the amount of bombardment hitting eastern Aleppo from air forces, either the Syrian or the Russian, is dwarfing anything else. That doesn't mean
you say the Syrian or the Russian. The US Secretary of State John Kerry, Dr. Deri, has said there are up to 6 internal wars right now going on in Syria. We know there are warplanes from Belgium and all sorts of European countries in the skies over Syria. But when you talk about the bombing, you only talk about either Syria or Russia. Why don't you address, for example, the recent bombings that came from Belgian fighter jets that killed civilians?
Rest assured that we issued many letters condemning all acts of bombing by the Americans, by the British, by the French, by all parties. We're not standing the side of anyone. And I said again, targeting any civilian is a crime against humanity from our point of view.
All right, Dr. Deri, let's get back to one of the main issues here. That is that you are one of the many NGOs calling for Russia to be excluded from the UN Human Rights Council, accusing it of war crimes. I would assume then you're also looking at Saudi Arabia, which is set to be re-elected for a 4th time. Human Rights Watch noting Riyadh has executed over 100 people in the first 7 months of this year. We know that Saudi Arabia is dropping American and British bombs on Yemen, putting it on the brink of famine, so says the UN. Dr. Deri, where is the outcry for UN human rights when it comes to Saudi Arabia about to be re-elected for the 4th time to the UN Human Rights Commission?
Sir, from my point of view, as far as I'm concerned, Saudi Arabia has no jet fighters on Syria shelling anyone.
Not in Syria, they're in Yemen. And excuse me, Dr. Deri, I do apologize for jumping in here so quickly. And obviously, we've got a bit of a sound delay. Those are American warplanes bought by Saudi Arabia, flying in the skies over Yemen, dropping British bombs. Where is your outcry when it comes to the United Nations HRC?
As I said before, we spare no chance whatsoever to condemn any act against civilians. However, right now, what we're talking about within the Syrian context, and that's the reason why we raised our letter to impede the Russian effort to be part of the Human Rights Council. However, if anyone feels that they need to raise any issues regarding any state, regarding the issues of human rights, we have no problem with that, and we can stand by it. Targeting civilians is a red line that we cannot tolerate by any party.
Absolutely agreed. Of course, you work for the Syrian Relief Network. That is a humanitarian NGO. Of course, there's no, it's never acceptable to have civilian collateral damage. But again, you're one of the NGOs calling for Russia to essentially be booted off the UNHRC, and yet you don't have any problem with Saudi Arabia, which ultimately has one of the most dismal human rights records on our planet, and yet they're going to be re-elected to the UNHRC. What is your comment on Saudi Arabia and its human rights?
From where I'm sitting right now, I have enough evidence to object on Russia's nomination. However, I'm quite happy to address the matter of Saudi Arabia if you can provide me with the same evidence I have here regarding targeting civilians or committing crimes or anything against human rights.
The United Nations, Dr. Derry, the United Nations has already voiced serious concerns about potential war crimes committed by Saudi Arabia in Yemen. And now we turn back to Syria, where John Kerry says there are up to 6 internal wars in Syria. And as far as you're saying, as far as I can understand, Russia is the only superpower, as you say, that's causing trouble and bombing civilians in Syria. Does it not seem a bit one-sided?
I never said they're the only ones. Unfortunately, the Syrian arena right now is just a war by proxy. Everyone is fighting there. The problem is that Russia is very vocal about it, and they spare no effort to show their effort inside Syria. As I said, if anyone has issues with any other parties, please let us know, and we'll be happy to condemn any acts or crimes against humanity or so.
We appreciate those comments here on RT International. Dr. Derry, you just mentioned, just a moment ago, you mentioned that what's happening in Syria is a war by proxy. Now, there are many analysts out there that say that ISIS, ISIL, Daesh is actually a proxy army of mercenaries being used by the West to achieve regime change in Syria. So you say it's a war by proxies. Does that make sense?
From what we see day to day, my dear sir, that all the superpowers are just, dealing with each other on the Syrian arena, unfortunately, and all of them trying to justify what they're doing by saying we're supporting parties, different names, and they keep impeding any effort to stop the war. And I will go back to Russia when I say that they vetoed 4 times. The last one, I believe it was in October, just this month, against stopping Security Council resolutions to stop the war in Syria. So, as I said, I will stand by it that, unfortunately, it's becoming a war by proxy, and the superpowers need to sit down together on one table and decide and take action against the atrocity that's happening because of them.
And as you say, when you have got so many different superpowers in your own worlds engaged in a proxy war in Syria, it's always very difficult to get straight answers. Dr. Kais Daria, Regional Director of the Syrian Relief Network, thank you very much. Thank you for coming on RT. And thank you for joining us for the program today here on RT International.